Night has fallen over Egypt, but the households of Israel are not preparing for sleep. A lamb or young goat has been roasted. Bitter herbs and unleavened bread are on the table. Blood marks the sides and upper beam of each doorway. The people eat with their clothing fastened, sandals on their feet, and staffs in their hands. Before morning, the kingdom that has held them for generations will order them to leave. Why does Israel's freedom begin with a final plague and a meal that must be remembered? Exodus chapters 11 through 13 answer that question by showing how the Lord judges Egypt, shelters Israel through the Passover sign, and teaches the departing people to carry the meaning of that night into every generation. When Exodus chapter 11 begins, Pharaoh still refuses to release the Israelites. The earlier plagues have brought the confrontation to this point, but Moses now receives a different message. One more plague will come, and after it Pharaoh will drive the people out completely. Before leaving, the Israelites are to ask their Egyptian neighbors for objects of silver and gold. The Lord gives them favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, and Moses has become highly regarded among Pharaoh's officials and the people. Pharaoh continues to resist him, but many others in Egypt have learned that Moses' warnings cannot be dismissed. Moses tells Pharaoh what will happen next. About midnight the Lord will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn in the land will die. The judgment will reach from the firstborn of Pharaoh on the throne to the firstborn of the servant woman at the hand mill. Even the firstborn of the livestock will be struck. A great cry will rise throughout Egypt, unlike anything heard before or afterward. Among the Israelites, however, the Lord will make a distinction so complete that, as Moses says, not even a dog will growl against them or their animals. Moses tells Pharaoh that the king's officials will eventually come to him, bow down, and beg him to leave with all the people who follow him. Only then will Moses go. He delivers the warning and leaves Pharaoh in burning anger. The anger belongs to more than a personal dispute. Families remain enslaved while Pharaoh resists, bargains, and delays. His decisions have never affected him alone, and the announced plague will bring that truth into every level of Egyptian society. The death of the firstborn is among the hardest events in the Exodus account. The narrative never invites us to enjoy the suffering or hide it behind abstract language. It speaks of a cry filling the land because households are waking to the death of their firstborn, while the loss also reaches their livestock. Exodus presents the plague as judgment after repeated warnings and repeated refusal. Egypt has held a people in oppression, and Pharaoh continues to claim authority over lives the Lord has commanded him to release. Calling the plague judgment explains its place in the narrative, but it does not make the grief of Egyptian families small. The range of the warning is deliberate. Pharaoh's house stands at one end, and the household of a servant stands at the other. Royal position cannot protect the palace, while a low social position does not make another family's loss less real. The whole land lies beneath a judgment that Pharaoh's throne cannot prevent. Long before this night, Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 16, had told Abraham that his descendants would be oppressed in a foreign land. God would judge the nation they served, and afterward they would come out with possessions. Exodus presents Israel's departure as the fulfillment of that promise, without turning the evil of their oppression into something good. Before the plague falls, the account leaves Pharaoh's court and enters the households of Israel. The Lord begins by giving Moses and Aaron instructions about time. The month of Israel's deliverance is to become the first month of their year. That command is given while the people are still slaves. Their work and days have been ordered by Egypt, but the calendar of their future life will begin with the act by which the Lord brings them out. Israel will count time as a people delivered by God. On the 10th day of the month, each household must choose an animal from the sheep or the goats. If a household is too small to consume it, the family must join with a nearby household. The number of people and the amount each person can eat determine how they gather. The animal must be a year-old male without defect. It is kept until the 14th day, when the assembly of Israel slaughters the animals toward evening. The people take some of the blood and place it upon the two side posts and the upper beam of the doorway where the meal will be eaten. Inside the house, the animal is roasted over the fire. It must not be eaten raw or boiled in water, and anything remaining until morning must be burned. The meal belongs to one appointed night. It is not being prepared for storage or for an ordinary gathering on the following day. The people eat the meat with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Rather than assigning a separate symbolic meaning to every item, Exodus places the meal within their immediate situation. The herbs belong naturally within the memory of bitter service, while the unleavened bread reflects the haste with which they will leave. Bread ordinarily needs time for the dough to ferment and rise. Israel will not have that time. Even before Pharaoh gives the order to go, the bread tells the people that departure will come suddenly. Their posture at the table carries the same message. Their clothing must be fastened for movement. Their sandals must already be on their feet, and their staffs must be in their hands. They eat as travelers who may be summoned to the road at any moment. The Lord calls the meal his Passover. During the night he will pass through Egypt, strike the firstborn, and execute judgment against the gods of Egypt. No particular Egyptian deity is matched with each part of the plague, so there is no need to invent a detailed list. The claim is broader. The powers worshipped in Egypt cannot protect the land from the Lord's judgment, or keep Israel in slavery. The blood upon the houses will be a sign. When the Lord sees it, he will pass over the doorway, and the plague will not enter to strike those gathered inside. Moses later explains that the Lord will not permit the destroyer to enter a house marked by the blood. The blood is not described as a magical substance that controls God. Its meaning rests upon his command and promise. He appoints the sign, tells the Israelites where to place it, and declares what he will do when he sees it. This also prevents Israel from treating its protection as proof of moral superiority. The people are not told to compare their virtue with that of their Egyptian neighbors. They are told to receive the provision God gives, follow his instructions, and remain inside until morning. Every household must act upon what it has heard. The animal has to be chosen and slaughtered. The blood has to be placed on the doorway, the meal prepared, and the family kept within the house. Their obedience does not create the promise. It is their response to the word God has spoken. Moses gathers the elders and repeats the instructions. They are to select the Passover animals and slaughter them. Then they must dip a bundle of hyssop into a basin of blood and touch the upper beam and the two side posts of the doorway. No one may go outside until morning. The command to stay inside gives the scene a quiet tension. The Israelites cannot see what is happening throughout Egypt. They know what the Lord has said, and their place during the night is inside the marked house, eating the appointed meal and trusting that his promise will hold. Moses then looks beyond the first Passover. When the people enter the land the Lord has promised them, they must continue this observance. Their children will ask what the ceremony means, and the parents must explain that it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who struck Egypt but spared the Israelite households. Before the people have even left Egypt, they are learning how to speak to children who have not yet been born. The Exodus will not remain the private memory of the people standing behind those doors. It will become the shared history of generations who know the night through the testimony of their families. The people bow down and worship. Then they go and do what the Lord commanded through Moses and Aaron. Exodus gives no extended speech from them here. Their worship is followed by obedience as the households begin their preparations. The Lord also establishes the Feast of Unleavened Bread. For 7 days, Israel must eat bread without yeast and remove leaven from its homes. The first and 7th days are sacred assemblies, and ordinary work is suspended except for preparing the food people need. Anyone who eats what is leavened during the appointed period is to be cut off from Israel. The severity of the command shows that the feast cannot be separated from the form God has given it. Israel must not turn the observance into a general celebration while ignoring the details that preserve the memory of the departure. Unleavened bread is simple enough for a child to see and taste. Years later, an Israelite family may live in a settled home and prepare food from its own harvest. During the feast, however, the bread will bring the household back to ancestors who were driven out before their dough had time to rise. The feast begins in the evening of the 14th day, and continues until the evening of the 21st. It is to be observed throughout Israel's generations because, on that very day, the Lord brings his people out of Egypt. The final plague and the meal therefore belong together. The plague explains why Pharaoh releases Israel. The meal shows how the Israelite households are sheltered during the judgment, and how the delivered people will remember the Lord who brought them out. At midnight, the warning becomes reality. The Lord strikes every firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon. The firstborn of the livestock also die. Pharaoh rises during the night, along with his officials and the people of Egypt. A great cry fills the land, for Exodus says there is no Egyptian house without someone dead. What Moses announced in Pharaoh's presence is now being experienced from household to household. The account does not give the names or conversations of the grieving families. The sound of mourning is enough to show how widely Pharaoh's refusal has reached. Egypt sought to retain Israel's labor, but the consequences of that decision have entered Egyptian homes. During the night, Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron. He tells them to get up and leave his people. The Israelites may go and worship the Lord as they requested, and their flocks and herds may go with them. The concessions Pharaoh once tried to withhold have disappeared. He now orders the complete departure Moses demanded. The ruler who would not release Israel wants the people gone before any further death comes upon Egypt. Then Pharaoh adds a brief request, "Bless me also." The words show how far the balance of the confrontation has shifted. Pharaoh once dismissed the Lord's authority, but now, while judgment rests upon his household and country, he asks the Lord's servants to speak blessing over him. Nothing in the account identifies this request as a lasting change within Pharaoh. At this moment, he wants the disaster to end. His fear is unmistakable, but the text does not ask us to call it repentance. The Egyptians add their own urgency. They press the Israelites to leave quickly because they fear that otherwise everyone will die. Israel is given no long period to arrange supplies or prepare food for an extended journey. The people take their dough before yeast has been added. Their kneading bowls are wrapped in clothing and carried upon their shoulders. The haste anticipated in the Passover meal now appears in the streets as household after household prepares to move. The Israelites also ask the Egyptians for objects of silver and gold and for garments, as Moses instructed. The Lord gives them favor, and the Egyptians grant what they request. Exodus describes the result as Israel plundering Egypt. The word gives the departure the character of victory even though Israel has not fought a battle. Pharaoh possessed an army, officials, and the labor of an enslaved people, yet the slaves he could not keep are leaving with Egypt's wealth. This is not presented as a secret theft. The Israelites ask, and the Egyptians give while urging them to depart. No list of wages or modern settlement appears. The emphasis falls upon Israel leaving with possessions according to the promise of God. The Israelites travel from Rameses towards Succoth. Exodus counts about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Large herds and flocks accompany them, and a mixed crowd also leaves with them. The identity of everyone within that mixed crowd is not explained. The text simply shows that the departing multitude includes more than the Israelite men counted in the main number. We should not fill the gap with details Exodus does not provide. The size of the company changes the character of the scene. This is not one family escaping quietly across a border. Children must be gathered, animals driven forward, possessions carried, and households kept together while Egypt demands that they leave without delay. The people bake the dough brought from Egypt into unleavened cakes. They were driven out and could not wait, and they had prepared no other provisions. The instructions given before the night and the conditions of the actual departure meet in the bread they carry. Exodus says that the period of Israel's sojourning lasted 430 years. At the end of that period, on that very day, all the Lord's divisions went out from Egypt. The long period of waiting reaches its end at a particular moment within the story. The night is described as a night of watching kept by the Lord to bring his people out. Israel, in turn, must keep that night throughout its generations. The Lord watched over the people in order to deliver them, and the delivered people will observe the night in honor of him. Before moving further, Exodus gives additional Passover regulations. The meal is not treated as common food or as a festival anyone may enter casually. No foreigner is to eat it, while a purchased servant may participate after circumcision. A temporary resident or hired worker remains outside the meal. The boundary is not purely ethnic. If a resident outsider wishes to keep the Passover, every male in his household must receive circumcision. He may then celebrate, and is to be treated like a native of the land. Exodus states that the same law applies to the native-born Israelite and to the foreigner living among the people. Participation is tied to membership in the covenant community. An outsider who receives the covenant sign is not permanently excluded because of ancestry. The Passover animal must be eaten within one house. None of the meat is to be carried outside, and none of the animal's bones may be broken. The whole congregation of Israel must observe the feast according to the instructions it has received. These regulations preserve the integrity of the meal. It is eaten under one roof by a defined household gathering and kept through a shared obedience. The people do not design separate versions of Passover according to individual preference. Exodus then says that on that very day the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt by its divisions. The first Passover has been completed, but the meaning of the final plague still has to be carried into Israel's future. Exodus chapter 13 explains how the firstborn and the unleavened bread will continue to speak after the departure. The Lord commands Moses to consecrate every firstborn male. The first offspring to open the womb, whether among the people or the animals, belongs to the Lord. The command returns Israel to what happened during the night. Egypt's firstborn died, while the firstborn within the blood-marked Israelite houses lived. Those preserved lives are not to be treated as though the household has no obligation to the God who spared them. Moses again commands the people to remember the day they came out of Egypt, the house of slavery. The Lord brought them out with a strong hand, so nothing leavened is to be eaten during the appointed feast. The repeated phrase strong hand identifies the power behind their freedom. Israel did not persuade Pharaoh to adopt a kinder policy, or wait until Egypt no longer needed its labor. The Lord acted against Pharaoh's refusal and brought the people out. Their unleavened bread will remind them that freedom came through his action rather than through a gradual change in Egyptian policy. The month is identified as the month of Abib. When Israel enters the land promised to its ancestors, a land described as flowing with milk and honey, the people must keep this observance in the same month. They will eat unleavened bread for 7 days and hold a feast to the Lord on the 7th day. No leavened bread is to be seen among them, and no leaven is to be found within their territory during the feast. Remembering the Exodus affects what is kept in the home, and what is placed on the family table. On that day, a parent must tell a child that this practice is kept because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. The first-person wording allows a later generation to receive the Exodus as the history of the people to whom that child belongs. The child was not physically present in Egypt, but the deliverance created the community in which the child now lives. Moses says the observance will be like a sign upon the hand and a reminder between the eyes, so that the Lord's instruction may be in the people's mouths. The imagery brings the memory close to action, sight, and speech. Israel must not remember only with the mind. The story is to shape what the people do and teach. The consecration of the firstborn carries the same memory through a different practice. Every firstborn male among the livestock belongs to the Lord. Animals suitable for sacrifice are set apart to him, while a firstborn donkey must be redeemed with a lamb. If the donkey is not redeemed, its neck must be broken. The animal cannot simply be retained while the Lord's claim is ignored. Every firstborn son must also be redeemed. The command does not permit the sacrifice of Israelite children. The son lives, and a substitute is given. His redemption becomes part of the household's testimony that Israel's firstborn were spared during the judgment in Egypt. Once again, Moses imagines a child asking what the practice means. The parent's answer returns to Pharaoh's stubborn refusal and the Lord's act of deliverance. With a strong hand, the Lord brought Israel out of the house of slavery. When Pharaoh would not release the people, the Lord struck Egypt's firstborn. For that reason, Israel gives the firstborn males of its animals to the Lord and redeems its firstborn sons. The practice turns the memory of a single night into a question and answer repeated within ordinary family life. Centuries later, Luke chapter 22, verses 14 through 20, places Jesus at a Passover table, where he gives his apostles the bread and cup and speaks of his body and the new covenant in his blood. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 7 and 8, Paul calls Christ our Passover, and urges the church to keep the feast with sincerity and truth rather than with the old leaven of malice and wickedness. Those later connections do not require us to leave the households of Exodus too quickly. Israel does not free itself by defeating Pharaoh or discovering hidden strength. The people receive the provision God gives, act upon His word, and depart when He opens the way. Their obedience is active and concrete. They choose the animal, share with neighbors when necessary, apply the blood, prepare the meal, remain inside through the night, and gather their families when the order to leave arrives. None of those actions overpowers Pharaoh. Together they show a people trusting the God who does. Passover keeps deliverance from becoming a vague idea. Israel's freedom has a place in the calendar, food upon the table, and a sign at the doorway. Families must keep the practices God has given them and explain His actions when the next generation asks. The final night is therefore remembered through concrete things: a marked house, a shared meal, a firstborn son redeemed, and bread prepared for a hurried departure. These details keep Israel's attention upon what the Lord did rather than upon a general feeling about the past. Two sounds remain in the account. A cry rises from the Egyptian houses as the severity of the judgment becomes known, while the Israelite households bow in worship and follow the instructions they have received. Exodus allows us to hear both without making the grief smaller or the deliverance less certain. By morning, the blood-marked houses are emptying. Families lift kneading bowls wrapped in clothing onto their shoulders. Children are gathered, animals are driven forward, and silver, gold, and garments from Egypt travel with the departing crowd. Moses carries the bones of Joseph, who died trusting that God would one day come to the aid of his people and bring them out of Egypt. His remains now leave with the generation that sees that hope fulfilled. The multitude moves from Rameses towards Succoth. Behind them is the land where generations of Israelites lived under forced service. Pharaoh no longer determines where Israel will live or whom Israel may worship. The people are leaving Egypt with hurried bread in their hands and the memory of one terrible, decisive night already being entrusted to those who will come after them. If this careful reading of Scripture is helpful to you, subscribe to Bibles Slowly and continue with us as the biblical story moves forward.